with the Selway Bitterroot Free Church Foundation. We are a nonprofit partner to the U.S. Forest Service and primarily work in the Selway Bitterroot, the Frank Church River of No Return wilderness areas and surrounding wildlands. Our partnership with Open Air has been, this is our 5th year now, so we've had various different sites. This year was on the Nez Perce Clearwater, right out on the boundary of the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness, and yeah, we do a variety of different volunteer stewardship programs, this being one of them. We also have a variety of trail projects and lookout hosting with Claire in the back there, helps to coordinate at St. Mary's, cabin hosts. So we're kind of out and about on that 4 million acres just down the way. So yeah, so I had the pleasure of working with Erin this year and Kelly as well, and just looking forward to seeing what this time up at the lookout inspired you to create. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thanks everyone. Like mentioned, I'm a multimedia artist and I also teach at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And I was also an artist in resident at Castle Butte Lookout for about 2 weeks. 10 of those days I was solo. Actually not completely, I had my 2 dogs there with me. But I just got out a couple days ago and is still a little social interaction weary. But I am going to be referring to my notes throughout it. But I'm really, really happy to be here and I'm happy everyone could make it. I also wanted to extend my gratitude just to Open Air for making this opportunity happen. I know it was quick notice, but it was something that I really needed, especially as a young emerging artist, just really, really early in my career, finding time to make and just think and process outside of daily activities was really appreciated. So thank you, Kelly and Stony. Also, thank you, Chrissy, for, I know it was already said, but your contact during the time out there and getting me set up with gear to make it happen. I really appreciate that. And same with Jeff from the U.S. Forest Service and the whole crew working out there, clearing the roads, making the trail or the lookout a little bit easier to get to in a car. For this location, being able to present here for the first time, I'm really honored. This will come into play a little later, but Two Medicine Grill, which was my place of employment earlier this summer in East Glacier, Montana. It's like an American diner. And then friends and family, friends for Chris, Deanna, and Ryan for housing me, my friends, during the summer as I explore and work, and then always my family for supporting me. And then also all of you for coming out again. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Like Jonathan and I, who is an artist, partner, colleague, and friend sitting in the front, had the opportunity to work with Open Air in 2019. We stayed at Fish Lake, which was a remote cabin in the Selway Bitterroot for about 2 weeks. I ended up hiking in there with my dogs, and Jonathan got to fly in with the supplies. But I appreciate this relationship continuing on about, 4 years later. And this is one of the projects that we made up there, which was a cyanotype collaboration. Kind of thinking about memory, the digital view versus direct observation in wilderness during our time there. I do want to give you a little background about my work just so you can understand what I was working on at the cabin. These were also completed at the residency in 2019 and in the studio following the residency. So they were graphite observation drawings with layers of transparent ink. The layers of color were representative and depicted moments of personal amplified memory triggered by objects within the space. So far out, remote in the wilderness, but still objects were triggering some memories and my experience with that. Also within my work, I enjoy making with more tactile and physical processes. So I like to draw. That always goes back to my foundation, just drawing, especially from observation. Screen printing with handmade transparencies and stencils. A lot of folks use digital transparencies when they make screen prints, but I do everything by hand. And then cutting, assembling, building with wood and wood and fabric specifically. In a lot of my work, the process informs the ideas. For example, in my series Accomplishments, No Returns, these are detailed observation drawings of utilitarian, replaceable, sometimes broken items in my home floating in these very simply constructed memory boxes. I saw these as introspections of the domestic life and personal worth. Also questioning goods and labor and during isolation. So this was a time during COVID where I was just kind of drawing objects around my house and representing them in a grid. So the individual and the isolated becomes presented as a larger formulaic structure void of color when they're all assembled together. So in pieces of included color, I was thinking of sentiments and memories evoked from objects, kind of like what I talked about at the cabin. In my home, but specifically as a result of PTSD from a history with domestic violence. Fragments of color, shape, and texture are manipulated from the object's environment, disconnecting and abstracting a perceived sense of space, sort of like disassociation. This furthered, the idea of further exploring spatial illusion came into play in a series called Remodel Underway, which was a relief drawing series on store-bought wood that combined actions of carving, piercing, peeling, coating, sanding, covering, and drawing to inspect the origin and development of compulsive behaviors as coping tools for pain. They are unfinished just to represent the continuation in the process of managing and adjusting old and new behaviors and habits, kind of like a conditioning within your formative years, but also with daily living. So these are all life size, like this, the bowl of cereal in the bathroom window would be something that maybe you could think you could go up and grab, and there's some relief moments, but you can't actually go and touch it. And then this led to sculpture, so I'm going from 2D to more of a 3D interest. And I started working with combining different objects. So this is a hybrid pinball washing machine. And I found and used textiles. And the textiles within the actual, the body of the sculpture itself, we're transitioning from bleached to unbleached fabric from the head down, thinking again about memory with color, as well as the individual garments reflective of the daily grime and attempts to erase or numb through the use of substances, dulling and weakening the colors and material over time. So this is kind of a reflection of like the stigmatization of substance use and mental health. Another huge part of my life that I'm still trying to find into my practice, which I think this residency actually is helping me with, is including the places that I find important for healing from some of my trauma, exploring the outside, particularly in the mountains and more remote areas of the land. So the past couple of summers I got to spend in Glacier National Park, but I also need to sustain my living. So for employment, I worked at Two Medicine Grill, which is an American diner. Very fast paced, but it's one of like 2 or 3 spots that is actually open for breakfast and lunch next to the national park. So we get a lot of business, busy days. So essentially I went straight from working and like at this diner, and like Kelly had mentioned, it was a last minute. I was able to fill in to this to be able to participate in this residency. And where I was staying at, this is a place-based residency, so it is a lot about place and location. I was at Castle Butte in the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest. This is just taken directly from the Forest Service website, a little bit history about it, but it is sitting at 6,659 feet above sea level. So really great views all around of the surrounding area. And it was also once used as a fire lookout. And at Chrissy, is it still used as a fire lookout? No.
Not anymore. It's now on the reservation recreation system.
Okay. Yeah. So at some of the facilities at the Castle Butte where there was no running water, but there was a pit toilet, and all the water I brought in for me and the dogs were just in gallon jugs that I kind of left in my car and would haul up for cooking and drinking, etc. This is the inside of the cabin. See where Mika and Buddy are laying down. This is kind of their spot to hang out. The little firefinder on the right corner. And then the view from the other side, there was a nice wraparound porch around the whole thing. There was a little propane stove, and then just kind of area where I set up to work and draw when I wasn't hiking or exploring the area. And then also I did mention the views, but just every moment of the day, it just seemed, even if it was cloudy, it was like ominous, it was sunny, it was just kind of like you're awake and there and feeling the wind. But it was a great experience to have windows on all sides, and no matter where you looked in the structure, it was just like you're almost like living in the clouds in a way. Also from the lookout, the first day I was there was a fire that had been burning since the beginning in July that I was able to see from the beginning. So this is kind of a timeline, July 23rd on the left, July 28th. So as of today, I looked it up according to, what is it? NCWeb, yep, NCWeb. It's at 1,646 acres. So nothing huge. At first I was a little terrified. I am not used to sitting by fires. I think if I was out in backcountry hiking and I saw a plume like that, I'd probably want to just go and like hightail it out of there. But living with the fire and understanding like it's a part of the natural process of the land to kind of just it took a different, I felt like I learned more about how to live with these things in the distance, whether that was like metaphorically or like it was always there in a potential danger, but it doesn't have to be like magnified. So here's it on August 1st. You can kind of see some of the fire at night. It's pretty fun. So I'm talking about the views, but it's also about, I was trying to find a practice while out there. Like I mentioned, I'm a new teacher, not a new teacher, but early stages of my career. So a lot of my time, especially during COVID, has been invested in my students, just making sure that they're getting comfortable in the classroom again. I think I've been stuck in a rut these past few years. I haven't been able to it's been really difficult. So I just needed to find a routine, and part of my routine already is going out, walking. I don't know if this will work. Yeah, so you can kind of see there's a nice road and some trails around, but just walking every day, finding the other inhabitants of the area, some small bear tracks that we found. Let's see if I can go to the next one. Yeah, a lake nearby, ridge walks. This is Bald Mountain, so you could see Castle Butte from the Bald Mountain right across. And then also just looking closer to the ground. So bolete mushroom and lots of flowers. The interesting thing I moved out to the west for graduate school to Tucson from the Midwest 2017, so I've only been out in the West for 5 years, and in the Midwest it's very cornfields, flat. My childhood growing up was spent on the soccer field, on turf and grass. So I'm using these places a lot to move my body through the land and also process memories, and I don't know much about it. And I took this opportunity to really start not just seeing things, but trying to identify and learn. And for me growing up, part of that process of learning was drawing. I've always felt like I was a little bit slower of a learner, but drawing something really helped embed it in my memory. So I started to just look at and try to identify the plants that were on the trail while I was walking, take it back, and instead of drawing in my sketchbook, I had collected these guest checks that I had written on during my time at Two Medicine Diner. So these quick, fast-paced days, and I'm like, I know I'm gonna do something with them, because you just see them discarded in the trash, and something very replaceable. But I wanted to change that and make it into something precious and consider value. So I started drawing the flowers I was seeing and that I could actually observe and identify, which for some people are like, oh, that's obviously Indian paintbrush. And this was one of the first plants that I learned when I moved out west. But for me, even some of the most obvious ones to people who've been identifying these for years was like exploring a new place, exploring something new, and learning. So I started using a book that Jonathan gave me from a used bookstore for identifying, it's kind of an older book, I can't remember what it was called. Oh, Edible and Medicinal Plants of the West. But I think it was made in like the 80s or something, so the pictures aren't super high quality. I'm not sure if the information is still accurate to a degree. Depending on soil content in an area, like certain plants can be poisonous if you eat them, which maybe back then it wouldn't be so. But I started thinking about, okay, what sources am I gonna use for these drawings? Something I want to read, I collected one plant, and there was something about just using it to draw and discarding it that felt very wasteful. So I wanted to consider what I had with me, which was, of course, a phone. Like everyone has one of those these days to a certain degree, that I could document these flowers and not just have to draw them from observation right there, but still continue my walk and hike and travel through the land, but then study these plants later. So one thing from the Forest Service about picking wildflowers is that I found from their website is almost all wildflowers are fragile and many wilt and perish soon after being picked. Over the years, the repercussions of wildflower picking by unthinking people go far beyond the loss of the flowers themselves. A critical chain of events is triggered for years to come once wildflowers are lost. We don't often realize it, but wildflowers support entire ecosystems for pollinators, birds, and small animals on a micro scale. Butterflies and other insects, small birds, and animals depend on seeds, nectar, and pollen for their food supply and life support system. In addition, some pollinators are not very mobile or have very small home ranges or depend on just one species of plant and die once their habitat has been destroyed. So this made me think also more about, okay, do I really need to harvest or forage these plants to draw them? No. So I started just documenting every day, taking new pictures. I wouldn't be able to draw these, they're very tiny, intricate drawings on these, the checks are like this big. But I can still use these as a source later. So fireweed, daisy, elderberry. And then also while drawing these things, I'm starting to learn a little bit more about them. And I really liked learning about whether you could eat them or not. This idea of consumption and where we source our food, also tied to the guest check, or especially with the American food of a burger, these things that we're so far removed from It just really had me questioning this idea of convenience again and value and consumption. And then also just knowledge. Even though one flower could be edible, there might be parts that aren't edible or you need to boil them, which again I'm still familiarizing myself with. And I didn't end up harvesting anything and eating it besides huckleberries. But I think it's important to start to learn about the environment around you, and hopefully with people that have more experience, I can forage with them and they have the experience and knowledge. Again, so these drawings were started, a lot of them I started out at the cabin, but I see this as a longer practice. I have like a stack of these checks, and I think it'll be great to see over time how they look together. So this is the very, very beginning. Normally I don't like people to come into, I consider this like my studio, very in process. But again, I'm really interested to see how these as a group just kind of show the contemplative and slow process of drawing combined with the florals and berries around the lookout. It just provided a reflection on consumption, convenience, the work involved going into grow and harvest, but then also like the work that goes into just walking maybe like for a whole day around to find all these different things. But then what does that value mean, and what is the cost of convenience? What is the cost of being able to access these places, or what is the cost of actually eating this quick food that we get at a diner that maybe was transported 300 times, I don't know, across, that's a complete exaggeration, but these are some of the things that I was questioning and examining during my time at the cabin. So thank you very much. And I do have time for a few questions if anyone has anything they'd like to ask me or they're curious about, or throughout the talk.
Yeah. I was here a little late, so I didn't get your introduction. Are these processed, are they going into prints, or are they finished as drawings?
So I have some ideas for potentially doing large-scale replications in print form of the tickets themselves and potentially drawing on top of them. As of now, though, these specific drawings, there is a show that I believe they're going to be sent to in September internationally. The details are going to come a little bit later. It's not solid yet, but that's kind of the plan for just the beginning stages.
Which print process would you use?
Well, this semester in the fall I'm teaching lithography, and I really like the way, rather than just screen prints, it's very vibrant and it sits a certain way on the paper, so I was thinking of the lithography process might mimic the texture and quality that's coming through on the guest checks a little bit better.
And it's so predictable. I mean, once you get one print, it's going to be just the same. I'm an intaglio printmaker, so every plate you wipe is somewhat the same, somehow different, you know?
Oh yeah, I tried printing even like all the processes, right? I feel like I can print it 10 times and then get 2 that are maybe somewhat identical. But I love that process. That's of the printmaking. Thank you. Hi.
You're drawing on guest checks. I think does that remind you of ledger art at all? Because you had what's available and it was like part of something that you could then go from work to your other work, or how did that feel?
I would say in a way it was kind of like going from another productive process, like I'm making another thing out of a thing, and in a way it is work, but I also feel like it was transforming the stress of the day through something that I chose as observation and interest, versus when people come to the diner, it's me serving them. So it's kind of this reciprocity of learning between like the guest check, this is what I'm doing and acting and serving, but then later I'm kind of taking it and I'm being taught something as well. Yeah, so that's kind of how I saw it. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
I was a waitress once.
How many people have worked in food industry before? So many, yeah. Is that kind of experience of slowing down afterwards? I don't know about you, but it was always like a buzz, especially after busy days. So I really enjoyed, yeah, and getting like a daily practice. And these aren't huge paintings that are gonna take up an entire wall, and maybe I get bored with it after 3 months. I hope not, but again, I'm really excited to be just making again and seeing where this gets to.
Well, a few questions. I guess the first, like, do you remember the kind of process of thinking, like, oh, I should hold on to these, I'm going to do something with them? Like, I would have never thought that, other than, like, I should recycle this piece of paper. Like, I'm curious how that came about, that idea.
Yeah, I think it's because this spring I taught it's a foundations class for students called Amalgam. It's very open-ended, but that's basically the combination of different practices. But I also, during that time, I was teaching them about how material can communicate just as much as the process or medium itself. So for me, I could work on a blank piece of paper, which would be very reminiscent of like a traditional scientific botanical study, or I could use these things that are, again, what is the meaning of a guest check? It's discarded, it's useless, it's in a way commodity, it's like, it's there, we have stacks of them, but then, so I think that's kind of what informed it. And I saw one of my coworkers like just throw it away, and there was a little bit of coffee stain on it, and I'm like, that's kind of beautiful. It's already starting to like get stained and the crinkles. So I've always found like these things that are discarded and overlooked being metaphors maybe for larger ideas of like even servers are often overlooked in their job. I know friends that like people come to the table and maybe they won't like acknowledge them, but I have a lot of friends that will not do that too. Anyway, that's what I was thinking.
And then will you follow up with the grill and show them, like, this is what I did with the guest checks I got from your
Yeah, I'm still considering presentation, whether I just want them all together without a frame behind glass, so you're kind of exposed to the material, and just the small detail of the drawing. But I also thought maybe just framing individually, and definitely I'm going to send them one. I don't know what they'll do with it, but hopefully they don't throw it in the trash. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I bet it'll be on the wall.
Yeah. I have a couple questions too.
Yeah.
One about your time at the Lookout. What was your relationship with light? Because if you have windows on all sides and you're up so high above everything, like, how was that being in so much light all the time?
It was great for drawing, especially during the day, using natural light. I always find that my preferred method. But as far as just living out there, I definitely adjusted my sleeping to the light patterns. I fell asleep even before the sunset sometimes, or like right after when it was still a little twilight in the area. And then waking up as soon as light hit in the morning. And then it was kind of strange. I always feel like during the school year I wake up before I didn't set an alarm. So it was kind of strange not having, like, just waking up maybe an hour later because it was cloudy that morning, or a little bit more smoke in the area from, not just smokes from this fire, but all around. Yeah.
And then I think one thing that strikes me about these guest checks is you know, like there's something about the font and the design of them that feel like they've looked this way for a very long time. And so I'm thinking about how so much of our interactions are becoming more and more digital. And there's something about these guest checks that they even feel like an object that might not be around much longer. Maybe the same way the flowers potentially might not be around a lot longer. And so I feel like they have a really nice relationship with each other in that way because I don't know, they're talking to me about how quickly things are changing and,
Oh yeah.
you know, maybe something that's been the same for a long time might not be around much longer. And even thinking about this idea of a guest, you know, and there's so many like food interactions that we have anymore that you don't even interface with a person anymore. Because you just you order it online and you go in and you grab it and you don't even, you know, see a person. And so there's something kind of lovely too about how the food checks are capturing this idea of like interacting with a person and someone being a guest. And so I don't know, I like that relationship. I guess it was a comment and not a question. But
No, I'm glad you got that from the checks because I mean, flowers and fauna and those have always been used in like vanitas paintings, memento mori, the ephemeral, right? That it doesn't last. And I do see that a lot. Like we did have a means, like we would charge people on a screen, but we would have to calculate what it was before putting it in there. So it was kind of like analog meeting like new digital, which is an interesting conversation. And I think that these pieces do start to evoke and question even how do we value each other as we try to order food from one another or other services. Yeah, so thank you for that comment. Are there any other comments, any other questions?
How long do you think these will last, the paper, actually? You know, the ledger paper, especially the old ledgers, is a good quality paper. And so that paper, or those prints actually show up in museums and everything. So I'm wondering how old a check did you ever see?
I know, that is a question I had while out there. The duration of its existence, which I think also reflects the land itself, the way we manipulate it in a way, like what is the duration of its existence if we continue on the ways that we are going. But no, I have not seen a guest checker how long it can last, so I'll be interested to see if maybe, I would hope I can live to be an old age and maybe like if I was 90, seeing it like deteriorating in the case and yeah, but I suppose I wasn't too concerned. It's kind of like the process of making food too. Like my mother made wedding cakes growing up, and she would put hours, days into these very intricate stacked wedding cakes just to be eaten. So I find that the process of like food preparation as well, very like so much work went into preparing 100 meals every day at the diner, just to either the remnants be in the trash or
just gone.
If you wanted to preserve, you'd have to document it somehow.
Yes.
You know, have to document
Yeah.
it. Well, what is the surface like to even, I mean, you're used to art paper and tooth and all of that. So are you using watercolor, or are you using colored pencil, or what are you using?
I use Prismacolor pencil, and I've used Prismacolor on much more high quality paper before, so there was this getting used to the material and applying it and getting a little frustrated because I think there's detail I would be able to get on different paper, and I also saw like that kind of frustration and letting go to like within the process, like this is what I can control right now. But it also reminded me of drawing in my notebooks in high school a little bit, like that kind of paper, just the spiral notebook, and I probably did a little bit too much of that, so it was familiar in that sense. Yeah.
Right now at the MEM, there's an incredible exhibit by a young man who had drawn. Some of his drawings are just in the you know, ones that have the little spiral edges and torn out, and they're intricate and beautiful. And they have this wall of so many of his drawings too. It's on the 3rd floor. It's worth going to. You might be interested.
Definitely.
He's really an interesting person. I'm so glad they're supporting him.
It's the Missoula Art Museum, Tyler Krasowski.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's still up for a little while.
But anyway, everybody, thank you so much for coming tonight. You're welcome to stay and mingle and have some more snacks, but thank you so much for making it. And thank you, Erin.
Yeah.